What was the creepiest thing someone said on the first date? You've actually been talking to my mother. I'm not very good at things like this. Apostrophe. We had sexted. Edit to explain. I'm a girl and mom was texting for her son. Has just talking on the phone and inserts. It's not like I want to rape you or anything. He tried to contact me for a face-to-face date. I don't respond. He shows up to my office on a campus. Starts raging and gets security called on him and escorted off. Friend told me the guy not only asked for a selfie, but posted on Facebook with the caption "My queen." First time meeting. I invited my ex to join us for lunch. Went on a Tinder date to the movies when I was 18. He picked me up in his truck and played terrible loud depressing music. In the theater, he was on his phone swiping on Tinder the whole time. Then leaned over and told me that I was lucky to be out with him because all these other girls wanted to be with him. Yikes. My roommate picked me up when I excused myself to the bathroom. I told this guy I played the piano, and like half an hour later he said, if I wanted you to always remember me, I'd break your ring fingers. You know, cause they don't heal well, and then you'd always think of me when playing. Apostrophe. Suffice to say, I left the restaurant fairly quickly. Can I cut you and drink it? She was serious. Look, this has to go well. Both of my brother's wives are pregnant with their second children. Do not let me down. Said to me within 3 minutes of sitting down. Mid-date he placed his hand on my stomach and said my son will grow here. I love Asian girls. They remind me of children. Apostrophe. That isn't a red flag. That's a red banner. Went out with a girl one night, and after dinner she drove me up into the mountains. I was new to the area, and after a while, when there were no more lights, she started talking about serial killers. I still remember her saying I used to think about getting away with stuff like that sometimes. He wanted to go for a walk at the park with me at 4 AM. So when I said no he said, "Don't worry, I won't rape you," and gave me a twisted smile. I have a relative in banking. I have checked out all of your family financially. WTF. What do you say to that? I want you to carve your initials on my thigh with a knife. She was very serious. He told me he could rape me if he wanted. He wasn't joking. Within knowing each other about an hour he told me he had never wanted kids before. But the moment we met he felt it biologically. Then he told me he wanted to be my son's stepfather as well. When we get married I can wear this dress. First date went back to her place, and while giving me the tour she pulled a beautiful wedding dress out of a closet and said this to me while holding it up to her body. Edit. I actually said AWW put it on, and we conduct then never called her again. 3 weeks later she called me at midnight. I know you have people watching me. I can't go to work or school with your people sitting across the street all day and night. Bragging about going to Cuba and Thailand to meet cheap sex workers. We would have cute babies, or my personal favorite for Halloween we could go as a slave and master, haha. Get it? Because you're black? Haha. He was in the military, Canadian. I asked him if he ever did any volunteer work overseas with the military and he said, no. I joined the military to kill people, not to help people. Apostrophe. Chugged my beer and got out of there as fast as I could. If anyone is out there struggling to find dates, just needs to read this thread and realize if these people can get first dates, you can do anything. A one night stand once told me I smelled like his mum. At least it was smell and not taste. Was new in town. Swiping on Tinder because I was bored. Do your friends know you're on a date? No, I could kill you and no one would know, haha. There was no second date. After getting us lost on the way back to my friend's house, late at night, in a state I was only visiting. What? Do you think I'm going to take you out into the woods and rape you? Lol. Apostrophe. He had a loaded gun rack in his truck and a knife on his belt. I was 15. It was not funny. You look just like my sister. And later in the date he admitted that's something he liked about me. Needless to say, no second date with Jamie Lannister. This is a nice place. I've seen you eating here before. Apostrophe. drove me out to the desert for a planned stargazing slash bonfire thing. I know it's a dangerous first date slash meeting. I was stupid and young. Once we found a good spot, he turned the car off and told me, "Now this is where I kill you." He said it with a smile and started laughing. I'm just glad he was just joking, but doesn't make it less creepy. Spend most of the date talking about the dark web and how you can buy drugs and human organs and how cool it sounded. Awkward but okay. Next day called and invited me to go shooting in the desert. Noopy. They didn't say anything. It's what they did that creeped me out. They kept taking pictures of me when I wasn't looking. The only reason I knew this was because the first picture they took, they didn't shut the shutter sound off. So full disclosure, I used to be a fan of Hitler. Happened to a friend of mine about 5 minutes into meeting them for the date. He told me several times how beautiful his mom and teenage sister were and that he hoped our kids got his genes. He told me I need to be more submissive, like Thai women. He expected me to be that way because I'm an immigrant from a third world country, and he was upset that I'm too westernized and independent. It was offensive on so many levels. I was at a really nice diner on this one date. She remarked how she wished she could order my penis on whole wheat bread so she could pretend it was a slice of thick roast beef. I felt like the people around us could hear all this too. Well, I left and never talked to her again. Very uncomfortable and weird. Don't worry, I'm not a serial killer. I was raped, and then he asked if I wanted ice cream while I was in his car weeping silently. I didn't go out with anyone for 2 years after that. That she wanted, get plastic surgery to become a cat, and was really into blood play. Within 10 minutes of meeting, a blind date started talking about dead people in her family. Wanna see my oddities? Apostrophe. She showed me her dead animals in jars, surrounded by healing crystals all neatly organized on some nice shelving. Mind you, the rest of her room was a ducking disaster. Had a friend tell me of a Tinder horror story he had. On the first date she confessed that she wanted him to rape her. She wanted to be punched in the face or threatened with a knife to satisfy her fantasy. After the dinner date he blocked her on everything. She PM'd him a few days later on Tinder saying how he was such a horrible person to leave after she had opened up to him about her fetish. She was jailbait waiting to happen. I met a guy and we went in his cars to get dinner. Everything was fine, and then he drove me back home. Then I got a super long text about how he touched my hand for a second and how nice it felt. But he definitely explained every detail in a way that made me feel really uncomfortable. This was all followed by messages saying he's not worth being with me and that he will rather kill himself. I felt bad for him, but it was too much for me, and at some point I blocked him. I might not have the exact wording correct, but it was something like this: I got expelled from my last school for forcing myself on a girl. She totally wanted it, though. That was over 25 years ago, and I can still hear his voice in my head when thinking about it. I noped my way out of there as soon as possible, and never spoke to him again. But he went to my school, so I unfortunately did have to see his ugly face for another year or two after the incident. He told me about all the crimes he committed in his past, about his alcoholism and drug abuse, his estrangement from family. He got everything out there immediately for me to hear on the first date, while we sat across from each other sipping coffees, and I was actually very impressed with his honesty and openness. It struck me, after being with many different guys who had concealed and lied about important things, this wasn't the typical kind of guy I would have continued dating, given the things he had experienced. But I really felt he was a good person at heart. He had gotten through rehab and a 12-step program, made his societal amends, and was working in a job he liked. We went on a second date, and it was then that I realized I could really fall for him. 2 years passed, and now we are engaged. My mom, who is a practicing Protestant, went on a blind date once sometime before she met my dad. The guy she was set up with then claimed to be a Satanist. Not an edgy atheist with extra steps, but ultimately harmless Satanist. Him talking about a legitimately worships the devil one. Yeah, that date went about as well as could be expected. Oh, and the best part? The guy was faking being a devil worshipper. Apparently he thought it would somehow impress her. You ever wonder what it's like to die? I'm going to cut your head off and mount it to the wall so I can look you in the eyes while I have sex with your corpse. She was giving me a back massage. I felt a sharp point in my back. She leans in and whispers, "I love knife play." Apostrophe. I couldn't get out of there quicker. It was sort of a date. He showed up and I walked outside to talk to him. We were leaning against his car, shooting the shit. And after regular chit chat things took a horrible left turn. He says, "What do you think about me tying you up, tossing you in my trunk, and then going to the middle of nowhere where I fulfill your rape fantasy? I may get very, extremely rough with you." My rape fantasy? Question mark? Question mark? Question mark? He and I have never even mentioned sex in the year that we had known each other. I told him to leave my house and never come near me again. I like to cut my sexual partners with knives. My ex-girlfriend bought me a new set of sex knives before she accused me of raping her twice. Apostrophe. Cue frantic texting under the table to get my dad to come pick me up from this possible rapist. Met this guy and he seemed fine enough until he said, "I love your dainty little feet. Those tiny toes. I want them in my mouth." Apostrophe. I wasn't sure if he wanted to eat my feet or play with them then eat them. He drove me home from the bar. I couldn't invite him inside. It was my parents' house. I asked if he would like my phone number. He replied, "No, I know where you live." Apostrophe. Went on a great first date with a coworker last year. Got back to my place and started getting busy. Once we were both naked. She said something like, "You could totally rape me and there's nothing I could do about it. I'm a tall, muscly guy." And I get that some women have these ravage me/helpless damsel fantasies. But I found it super creepy. I was also falsely accused about a year prior to that. And still a bit hypervigilant about it. So I stopped and asked her to leave. I wish more people were dying and injured. Otherwise it's boring. He was a paramedic and hated the quiet times at work. Your soul is mine. She started showing me picture of amputated animal limbs and shit. She was a veterinary nurse. We're married now though, so I guess she knew what she was doing. You sometimes behave like a 4-year-old, but a sexy 4-year-old. We went on an early evening coffee date, and it was going pretty well. So we grabbed dinner together afterwards. Towards the end of eating he said, "You know I could break your heart so easily. I could absolutely destroy you. I could make you fall in love with me and then just, poof, disappear." Apostrophe. I laughed uncomfortably, but the conversation basically died after that. When we finished eating he asked if he could see me again. And I said, you know, maybe, and got my ass out there. He also at one point asked me for some sugar, a kiss, while we were chatting in his car, which I firmly said no to, and he said, "So some girls are pretty and like to be called smart, and some are smart and like to be called pretty. Which are you?" Apostrophe. So many things wrong with his attitude. Looking back I can't believe I stayed out so long. But the weirdness didn't start until after agreeing to get food. I kept just thinking maybe he had an odd sense of humor until the final "destroy you" line. Then I was out. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.